Sermon 38, Joshua, the New Leader.
Our story title tonight is Joshua, the New Leader. Of course, our last discussion of the Old Testament, Moses had died there on Mount Nebo, and he was buried. God had selected Joshua to be the leader, and he would lead him where he wanted to go. He told Joshua that every place that the sole of his foot shall tread upon, he said, that is the land that I've given unto you. So basically everywhere that would be the land, the promised land, that's where Joshua would go. Joshua commanded the officers of the people, saying, as he passed through the host, he said, prepare victuals, for within 3 days ye shall pass over this Jordan, to go in and to possess the land which the Lord your God giveth you to possess. And you notice Joshua did not waste any time. That as they got there to the Jordan River, ready to cross over the Jordan and go in and take the western part of the promised land, and that he told the people within 3 days you're going to be on the other side of the Jordan. Now Moses, while he was alive, had defeated the inhabitants of the land on the eastern side and had divided the land. He divided it to Reuben and Gad and half the tribe of Manasseh, and they were to live in the land. And Joshua said to these families that were on the east side of the Jordan, to the Reubenites and the Gadites and half the tribe of Manasseh, spake Joshua, saying, remember the word which Moses the servant of the Lord commanded you, saying, the Lord your God have given you rest, that is, they had their possession, and have given you this land. Your wives and your little ones, your cattle, shall remain in the land which Moses gave you on this side Jordan. But ye shall pass over before your brethren armed, all the mighty men of valor, and ye shall help them. The Bible says that there were 40,000 armed men from this group that would go before the children of Israel that would cross the Jordan. Those who would not obey Joshua would be put to death. Now that would be the sentence. And keep in mind that many times the leadership of Moses and Aaron had been challenged. That there had been many revolts that came up, tried to say, who is Moses or who is Aaron, even in Moses' own family. Aaron and Miriam at one time rose up against Moses. But God said through Joshua that now the sentence would be strict, that anyone who would not obey Joshua would be put to death. Whosoever he be that doth rebel against my commandment, that will not hearken unto thy words, and all that thou commandest him, he shall be put to death. And again, he encourages Joshua many times, be strong and of good courage. And Joshua was that type of individual. He had been since they had left Egypt. He had been a leader. He had been an individual that proved himself. When you read about Joshua in the Bible, both Old and New, Joshua was a good man. He was a person that sought to please God and to obey God in the things that he did, and he was a good leader. He was strong and he was courageous, and he was willing to get the job done. So he said to the children of Israel, in 3 days we're going to cross the Jordan. You need to be ready. He sent 2 spies across the Jordan to go and spy out the land. Not like Moses, where God had commanded to select 12 spies, but Joshua sent 2. The first city that they would come up against once they crossed the Jordan would be the mighty city of Jericho, with its strong walls. And so Joshua sent the spies into the promised land to go and spy out Jericho and to bring back word again. The spies went into the land of the west. Joshua sent them to spy secretly, to view the land, to view Jericho. They went and they came and stayed in a harlot's house by the name of Rahab, and they lodged there. The king of Jericho heard that there were Israelite spies in the land, and he sent people to the house of Rahab requesting to know about these spies. The Bible tells us that Rahab had hid the spies upon the roof of the house. And then when they came, she told the people that came inquiring about the spies that they were here, but they're not here. They're gone on. Because she had protected the lives of the spies, she said to these spies when they came that the word of what God has done, what he has done, has spread throughout the land. And she said the people fear. They're afraid. They were afraid of the children of Israel. They had heard about the crossing of the Red Sea. They had heard about the defeat of all the people that were on the east side of the Jordan River, about the mighty King Zion, about the mighty King Og of the Amorites, and how they came out against the children of Israel and how they were defeated. How everyone that came up against the army of the nation of Israel saw their demise. And she was afraid for herself, and she was afraid for her family. And she said, basically, promise me that when you come into the land, that you'll let my family live. And the spies made an oath with her, and they said, we will, but there's two things that you got to do. Number one, you've got to put a scarlet cloth, or thread, the Bible says, in the window. And it's got to remain there so the army of Israel will know that this is your house. Number two, all your family members have to stay in the house. If they go out of the house, their own blood is upon their own heads. There'll be no protection for anybody that's outside of your house. Salvation will be found within the walls of her house. So she took a cord, she let them down the wall. She encouraged them to escape into the mountains, to remain there 3 days until the army of Jericho that had been sent out to find them had come back. And then they could safely go back across the Jordan and bring report to Joshua. And they did come back across the Jordan, and the report, unlike the 10 spies that came back when Moses sent them out, these 2 spies came back to Joshua and they said this: they're afraid of us. They're afraid of us. There's no fight in them. There's no fight in these people. They're afraid of us. So Joshua made preparation to get ready to cross the Jordan. He told the priests to get the Ark of the Covenant ready, to carry it out a space away from the camp so that the people could see it, so that they would be able to follow the Ark of the Covenant when it would move forward. And when the priests came to the banks of the Jordan River, as their feet stepped into the water, just like the waters of the Red Sea, the Jordan River began to part. And everywhere that the priests carrying the ark would put their feet, they were standing on dry ground in the middle of the Jordan. Many years ago, there was a great debate over the baptism of Jesus in the Jordan River between a Methodist preacher and what they classify as a Campbellite preacher, who believed that baptism was immersion in water. And in this debate, the Methodist preacher said, while Jesus could not have been baptized in the Jordan, of course he had never seen the Jordan, he just assumed that the Jordan was a small river, said Jesus could not have been baptized in the Jordan because you could take your foot and you could just stop the flow of the water in the Jordan River. Campbellite preacher got up and said, I believe I'd go further to see that foot than I would the Jordan. Taking a mighty big foot. The Jordan River at the place there at Jericho where they crossed was anywhere from 200 to 450 feet wide, depending on the time of the year. It was from 50 to 100 feet deep. So I don't think you can stop that up with a foot. Not only that, the Jordan River from its source down to the Dead Sea drops 600 feet in a short distance. But it's a curvy river. It's like a snake. It goes all the way down. And if it were not for the curves, then it would just literally wash the land away. And the reason that they have the Dead Sea is because the Jordan River, when it overflows its banks, will literally wash all the minerals and soil down the river and into the Dead Sea. And that's the reason that it's salty. That it would just literally wash all the minerals into the Dead Sea. And any place along the Jordan River that you may try to cross, there's going to be some kind of current because it flows continually. But during the rainy season, there's actually two banks to the Jordan River. It's what they call the inner bank and the outer bank. When it's not during the rainy season, the river pretty much stays within its inner bank, which the banks of the inner bank are lower than the outer banks. But when it overflows its banks, the river has cut its own path. And the river goes basically over the inner banks and floods out to the outer banks where it is cut, and that's where it stays. There are parts of the Jordan River during the rainy season that the river actually, when it's overflowed and the current is so swift, the water will run backwards. Now that's something to think about. That's like the water running uphill. And that's the force of the Jordan River. But when the priest's feet touched the water stood up as a heap. Just like when Moses led the children of Israel across the Red Sea. And they walked across the river of Jordan on dry land. The priests got to the center of the river and they stood with the ark until all the people had passed over. And once the people had passed over, God commanded Joshua to send 12 men into the river and to select 12 stones that they would take out of the river and that they would take to Gilgal, which would be their first stop after they crossed the Jordan. And they were to take those stones that they would set up as a memorial. Not only that, Joshua told the men to select 12 stones that they would put in the river. And the Bible says, if you read it, they're there until this day. That they set up 12 stones at Gilgal as a memorial. And as a memorial there in the Jordan River, there are 12 stones, indicating that God had divided the waters and allowed the children of Israel to cross over. And so this was God's way of setting up a memorial for the children of Israel and those that would come after. The Bible tells us it came to pass when the kings of the Amorites, which were on the side of Jordan westward, and all the kings of the Canaanite, which were by the sea, they heard how God had dried up the waters of the Jordan before the children of Israel until they were able to pass over. And the Bible says that their hearts melted. Their hearts melted. What kind of army could go against such a force to be able to part the waters of the Jordan River? Their hearts melted. There was no spirit in them anymore because of the children of Israel. But once all the children of Israel got across the Jordan River onto the west bank, and in our news today we hear a lot about the west bank. You hear them talking about it, the west bank. But once they had got across the Jordan onto the west bank, God said to Joshua, it's basically, and I'm paraphrasing, it's time to correct a wrong. You may remember when God had selected Moses. Moses was in the land of Midian. And after a discussion with God, Moses did not want to go and lead the children of Israel. He made up all kinds of excuses. He said, he was not a good speaker, and he said, who am I that you select me, and things of this nature. And God finally convinced Moses that he was going to be the one that would lead the children of Israel. And Moses and his wife, Zipporah, and their sons, they started to go to Egypt. They left the land of Midian, and that night God sent an angel to kill Moses. And the reason he sent that angel to kill Moses is because Moses had failed to keep God's law. He had not circumcised his sons. He had not carried out the law that God had given to Abraham, that on the 8th day, every Hebrew male was to be circumcised. After the children of Israel refused to go into the land of Canaan and wandered in the wilderness, God wasn't with them anymore. Basically, he wasn't. They were just wandering around the wilderness. Moses was just trying to keep them intact. And these people who are in rebellion against God were also in rebellion against his law, and they did not circumcise their children. They did not keep God's law. And so all of the young men whose parents died in the wilderness had not been circumcised. And so now they're on the west banks of the Jordan, and they're ready to possess the promised land. And God said this wrong needs to be corrected. That you circumcise all the males. You circumcise all the males. And so Joshua had the, I guess we'd say physicians or midwives or whoever did the circumcision to prepare the instruments that they needed and to circumcise the males. And they stayed there on the banks of the Jordan, there at Gilgal. And the reason it was named Gilgal was because of that very act. That they stayed there until they were well enough to move on to Jericho. And God said, he said to them that they were correcting a wrong. He said that the curse, if you please, of Egypt was now lifted off of them. Joshua was the new leader. The Bible said it came to pass when Joshua was by Jericho that he lifted up his eyes and he looked, and behold, there stood a man over against him with his sword drawn in his hand. Joshua went unto him and he said unto him, Art thou for us, or are you our adversary? He said, Nay, but as the captain of the host of the Lord, I am now come. Events are changing in Israel. Joshua now, as the leader of Israel, gets a leader. He gets an angel to follow. He tells Joshua, As the captain of the host of the Lord am I come. Joshua fell on his face to the earth. He worshipped and said unto him, What saith my Lord unto his servant? And the captain of the host said unto Joshua, Loose thy shoes from off thy foot, for the place whereon thou standest is holy. And Joshua did it. Now keep in mind, when they were going through the wilderness, they had the pillar of cloud to guide them in the daytime. They had the pillar of fire to guide them at nighttime. And then when Joshua took over the leadership, they were to follow the Ark of the Covenant as it moved forward, just like they did in the wilderness when God was directing them, and they were to follow the Ark of the Covenant wherever they went. But now God says to Joshua, because you're going in to do battle against the inhabitants of the land, you're going to have a captain of the host. And I take that to mean the host of angels that's going to go before you. And is going to fight with you. And is going to help you defeat the people in the land. When Joshua comes to Jericho, ready to do battle, his forces are armed and they're strong. They're standing out looking at the city of Jericho, and God does something that no commander in any army had ever done and has never done. God, listen to what God said to to Joshua about Jericho. He says, Now Jericho is shut up because of the children of Israel. That is, they've locked the gates, they've locked the doors. They bolted the windows. They put chairs, if they had doorknobs, up against the doorknobs. They placed furniture against the door. They've done everything that they can to keep the children of Israel out. He says that Jericho is shut up. That is, they think they're locked in. They think you cannot get to them. But God said to Joshua, I have given into thy hand Jericho and the king thereof, and the mighty men of valor, that is of Jericho. And ye shall compass the city, all the men of war, go around about the city once. That is, you take the army and you just march around the city. You do that once, and you go on back to your camp. But you do that once every day. And for 7 days, they went out and they marched around the city. The instructions that were given to them, that on the 7th day, the priests were to take the Ark of the Covenant and go and march around the city to blow trumpets as they would go around. And when they had made a loud blast on the ram's horn, he said, when you hear the sound of the trumpet, you hear all the people shouting with a great shout, he said, the walls of the city shall fall down. Now, archaeologists that have been over there digging in that area, that have discovered the walls of Jericho, discovered something very strange about the walls of Jericho. You know, if an army came against the walls of a city with battering rams and tried to knock the walls down, the walls would fall inward or would just crumble down. But all of the walls of the city of Jericho fell outward, as if they were knocked down from the inside. And God said, when you obey these things that I've laid out for you to do, you go around the city one time for 6 days, and on the 7th day, you go around 7 times, you blow the trumpets, you blow the ram's horn, and you shout, and the walls will come down. And they did. And the children of Israel, its army, was able to go into Jericho and defeat this once powerful city and to take possession of it. Joshua told them to literally destroy the city. The only ones that were saved were Rahab and those in her house. The 2 spies that had gone into the land went to her house and brought her family out so that they would be protected. And they destroyed the city. Not only did Joshua have them to destroy the city, Joshua put forth a prophecy. He told them at that time, saying, cursed be the man before God that riseth up and builds this city. He said that man's going to be cursed. And listen to what he says is going to happen to him. He says his firstborn is going to die when he lays the foundation. And his secondborn and his youngest son is going to die when he puts the gate up. Now that was Joshua's prophecy. And it wasn't until the days of old wicked Ahab and Jezebel that anybody tried to rebuild Jericho. The Bible tells us that a man who was a Bethelite tried to build Jericho. He laid the foundation thereof in Abiram, his firstborn. He set up the gates thereof in his youngest son, Segub, according to the word of the Lord which he spake to Joshua, the son of Nun. God said this city is not to be rebuilt. It's to be destroyed. It's to be destroyed. The people of Israel feared Joshua as they had feared Moses. Joshua's fame and what God had done at Jericho was known throughout the inhabited world. And it caused fear in the hearts of all the Amorites and the other nations that were on the east side of the Jordan. Something else took place as they crossed the Jordan. They began a new life. They began a new life. The manna stopped falling from heaven. They would no longer be fed by God. That is, directly. They would eat of the promised land. And remember, God said unto them, said unto Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and said unto Moses as he led the children of Israel, I'm going to give you a land flowing with milk and honey. It's going to be a prosperous land. It's going to be a land that's going to be full of possessions. And so when they started their journey and crossed the Jordan, they no longer got manna from heaven. Everything was changing. It was a new life. They were taking possession of the promised land. You and I, by faith, look for a city which hath foundation, the Bible says, whose maker and builder is God. The only way that the writers of the Bible have to be able to describe to us what heaven is going to be like is like using terms that we can envision as being the most beautiful thing that we can possibly think of, that has streets of gold and gates of pearl, where there'll be no tears, where there'll be no hunger, where there'll be no thirst, where there'll be no pain, where there'll be no darkness, where there'll be no cold, but where there'll only be peace and harmony and love throughout all eternity. That's the only way that they can describe it. Because another writer said, it has not entered into the hearts of man the things that God has prepared for them that love him. If you're here tonight and need to respond to the invitation, won't you do so while we stand and while we sing?